Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to Dataworks. Thanks for coming along today. It's great to see you here in person. It really is a pleasure, whether you're joining us in person or indeed we're recording this, so we will be showing it virtually later on. It's a unique space which we believe offers unparalleled opportunities, not just for current or future tenants, but also for the advancement of medical science globally. And I know that might sound like a lofty suggestion here this morning, but when you hear the vision for Dataworks in the next hour or so, and indeed the wraparound support and unabashed welcome that vision has garnered in Northern Ireland and beyond around the world, you'll realise that today really is something at the start of something special. Now, we have a lot to get through today, including a keynote address from Peter Keeling, who's the Chief Executive of Dataworks' anchor tenant Diaceutics, and two panel sessions, which I know you'll find fascinating. But first, to set the scene, we're going to hear from David Burrows, who is the director at Benmore Octopus, the JV development company behind Dataworks. Before David gets going, we're going to show you a bit of a time-lapse video so you can see how this building rose out of the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming this morning and welcome to the Kings Hall Health and Wellbeing Park. Kings Hall is a 16-acre multi-sector development that incorporates a wide range of uses, including retirement and independent living, nursing home, primary care, multi-storey car park, and of course life sciences. The park sits with excellent infrastructure, being connected to rail, bus and motorway to key destinations in the north and south of Ireland, and sits in direct proximity to healthcare professionals, serving patients within the park and alongside Belfast's major hospitals and medical research facilities. The combination of a vibrant and entrepreneurial health community, large talent pool of scientific minds and proximity to top universities such as Queen's and University of Ulster makes Dataworks a new spatial model for life sciences companies, building a community which can learn from each other and share the knowledge. This sits at the heart of the vision for Dataworks. As part of the development, we will be creating on-site amenity with a range of facilities such as shops, restaurants, preschool and gym, all centred around a large plaza area. Additionally, there will be on-site residential accommodation for those who wish to live and work in close proximity, and an 18-hole golf course next door. Kings Hall Life Sciences will create a hub for life sciences companies of all sizes, from startups to large multinationals, and will provide state-of-the-art office, laboratory and shared spaces. The Dataworks building in which we are sitting extends to circa 40,000 square feet of accommodation, and the overall life sciences buildings will extend up to 200,000 square feet when completed. The life sciences sector in NI is strong, and we believe that creating a focus for this activity is vital if we are to stop the flow of talent out of Northern Ireland and maximise the flow of inward investment. Dataworks is the first step towards that goal, and we are delighted that Diaceutics share that vision and have committed to locating their global headquarters in this building. We believe that the development will provide a secure and collaborative space for companies to focus on the rapidly growing and highly valuable healthcare data market. Diaceutics' commitment to Dataworks is testament to the location, space and collaborative potential of this site, one that will meet the needs of the growing precision medicine sector here in Northern Ireland and around the world. We look forward to welcoming others onto the site and building a world-class hub capable of tackling some of the biggest medical challenges in the world today. So thank you for your time, and I will leave you with another short video.
David. And with the scene now set, I want to introduce you to Joanne Rhodes, who's Chief Executive of the Health Innovation Research Alliance Northern Ireland, to tell us a little bit more about the work of the organisation here.
Hello everyone, I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and it's the first in-person event I think that I've done since taking over my role as Chief Executive of Harani. Harani is a not-for-profit alliance of universities, the health sector across Northern Ireland and industry, and linking in with the public sector. And we've got a very clear mission. It's to provide vision for the health and life sciences sector to align and exploit the unique opportunities that are afforded within Northern Ireland, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's to support cross-sectoral and institutional collaboration across the whole of the region, and it's to act as a single voice and an honest broker to bring in, investment, to bring industry collaborations, and to really develop a vibrant ecosystem here. So the health and life sciences ecosystem here supports over 250 companies, and since moving here last year to take up this role, I've been absolutely blown away by the value and the dynamic nature of these businesses and the real desire to make a difference in the health space. It also has a turnover about 1.1 billion and a year, and supports 8,800 jobs across the sector, and it's responsible for about 10% of the trade, and I think this is only set to grow given the convergence that's occurred during the pandemic. So obviously COVID has provided a spotlight on health and life sciences, and I think this really positions us well to be ready for investment and also the infrastructure that's occurring across Northern Ireland. So there's the City Deal infrastructure investments, a number of centre of excellences are being built, and they align with health and life sciences in clinical, in connected health, and also in precision medicine. It's great to see the infrastructure here being built as well, and I think it's phenomenal to have just watched that video and see it rise from the ground. Health and life sciences is really a game of calculated risks, and I think this has shown a calculated risk in developing this building here and creating a real great space for the health and life sciences companies to meet and exchange ideas and create new ideas and new opportunities. So this leads me on to one of the things that I think is really exciting here. There's a real legacy of some of the larger companies in Northern Ireland in health and life sciences, Randox, Almac and Norbrook. But what we're seeing emerging now is a number of startup companies that are really leveraging the health tech scene. And it's great to see that, as I said, COVID has accelerated this. So I think there's a real opportunity to develop a diagnostics supercluster, because obviously diseases know no borders, and we need to leverage the data that we have already existing on patients to make sure that we can diagnose them earlier and treat them more effectively, and also, importantly, encourage patients to manage their disease more effectively. And I think that's where the value of a site like this really comes into the fore. It's going to have primary healthcare here, assisted living. There will be people walking past from the population as well. And so our rich, diverse scene that may be developing medical devices or trying to understand lifestyle and nutrition data that people will freely give to you, I think it's going to be absolutely key to developing new ideas that are going to impact health and life sciences going forward. So I'm really delighted with Harani to play a role in supporting the businesses here. And as I go around and make connections and hopefully meet more of you and meet more of the people who are watching this video as well, really understand what your strategic vision is and how that can align with Northern Ireland's strategic vision in health and life sciences, and really put us on the map for health and life sciences. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Great to hear the work that you're doing, and particularly because collaboration is so important to the future of the life sciences sector here. Joanne's going to join us later on to chair the final panel session, but before that we're going to hear from Peter Keeling, who's Chief Executive of Diaceutics, and why he chose to base his company here.
Good morning. Isn't it great to just have a meeting? And and look at the social distancing going on here. It's tremendous. So we're in a building called Dataworks, so it is only but appropriate that I talk to you about a little bit of data. And in fact, I'm going to talk to you about 3 epidemics, 2 ecosystems, and 1 vision. And of course, if I start with the epidemics, the best place to start with is the epidemic that we're all living under and have been living under for the last year, which is the epidemic of COVID. But COVID has reminded us several things, and Joanne already alluded to the fact that disease knows no borders, something we know very well in Northern Ireland. But to abstract that, and that is that the population here and the population in Beirut and the population in Boston have equally felt the hand of COVID affect its lifestyle. And it has reminded us that we live in a very, very modern and very connected world where disease really just spreads rapidly. And indeed, the response to those diseases is equally global. It's not regional, it is global. And to some of the life science companies that Joanne alluded to, some whose names you will know well, others you will not know yet, but I'm quite sure will become a force in disease management on a global stage. The other thing I would say that COVID has reminded is the importance of diagnosis and data. Diagnosis is the front line of disease. We are all obviously totally interested. What's the treatment? What are the vaccines? But just remember that before we had all those vaccines, it was who was tested, how were you tested, when were you tested? And I just park that thought with you for a second as to that was important, and we'll come back to that in a second. And of course, data is key. Have you not yourself been part of switching on the radio in your own house and saying, what's the R number? What's the infection rate? We've all become data specialists in our own way as a result of COVID. And the second epidemic that I want to talk about is one that I think is actually unfolding around us at the same time, and it's COVID plus cancer. So cancer, one doesn't necessarily think as an epidemic, but in many ways it is one of the diseases of our modern times. It is a disease, or a range of diseases that has spread very significantly across the planet. And as we start to understand those diseases, we start to create new treatment options, and there's been wonderful breakthroughs in that space. But the one thing I would say is that what we're really feeling is that there's a sense that COVID plus cancer will create impact for that 4th or 5th wave of COVID and its impact on disease, not just COVID itself, but on those other diseases. And in fact, I use that as a metaphor to say is that, again, here in Northern Ireland, we have the ability to bring those types of observations onto the international stage. And you'll see in your little packs there an abstract that was submitted to a cancer conference normally held in Chicago every year, obviously held virtually, where that was a collaboration between ourselves at Dataworks and indeed Professor Lawler, who you'll hear from later on at Queen's University. And again, it's indicative of what we want to do, to take the local knowledge and the local insights and bring them back onto the global stage. Disease knows no borders. Our insights know no borders as well. And we've just as much right to get out and speak about these things as anyone else. The third epidemic I want to maybe introduce slightly controversially is an epidemic of Alzheimer's. Again, a disease of our time, a disease of an aging population. And I cite that because maybe some of you here in the room are wondering, why would you create a space like this alongside assisted living and nursing homes and GP practices? It's all about patients. It's all about patient flow. It's all about understanding what's really going on in the real world with patients, not in some clinical trial way off in the center. It's about observing and living amongst the people that you're trying to help. And for me, one of the inspirations in putting Dataworks on this site wasn't just the real estate or the location of this from a workforce point of view. It was the vision to really live alongside patients and patient flow and practitioners and healthcare workers who together will conspire and inspire future innovation. So those are my three epidemics. I mentioned two ecosystems. So let me go to the first of those ecosystems. I'm going to describe diagnostics as an ecosystem. Again, Joanne mentioned that there is an opportunity to create a diagnostic cluster here in Northern Ireland, amongst many other capabilities, no doubt. But just reflect for a second that diagnosis in many ways and diagnostics are the poor relation of healthcare. Yet it's probably of equal importance in terms of transforming people's lives. I'll give you an example of something that our own data illustrates to us in lung cancer. So we have significant pools of lung cancer patient data inside Dataworks, and we've been able to observe painstakingly the journeys that patients go from cough in lung cancer all the way through to a targeted treatment. And sadly, that is often a 4-year journey, 5-year journey, by which stage that disease has gone from probably early and highly treatable to very, very late stage and terminal. And along that way, we've also been able to observe the diagnostic events. There are some 10 or 11 typical diagnostic events that a typical lung cancer patient undergoes. Many of those, if you've all been touched again by cancer with relatives, etc. So we know the emotional roller coaster when somebody says you have a shadow on your lung or you're going for a biopsy. This entire diagnostic ecosystem is poorly understood, it's poorly managed, and yet has the key to really unlock a significant and profound change in disease management. So the reason why I believe that diagnostics and the data around diagnosis is critical is because whilst the entire planet has focused correctly on bringing forward new treatments, I think the world needs to shift and say is, before even people get the treatment, we have to find them earlier. We have to find the Alzheimer's patients when they're 40. We have to find the cancer diagnosis when they're 6 to 9 to 12 months into their disease. That is a diagnostic challenge, and we have the capability in Northern Ireland to both use the data and the science to bring those insights. We can stand on the world stage. We already are, and I think it's time to flex that muscle. That's the first of my ecosystems. The second ecosystem I want to reflect is a very personal one to me, and that is I had the good fortune some almost 30 years ago to spend a year at MIT in Boston. And MIT is a wonderful building and a facade if you've ever walked along the Charles River and reflected on these beautiful stately buildings, this fabulous institution, which in itself sort of drifts up to Harvard and all the good things that you know there. But back then when I was at MIT, what struck me is that you walked out to the back of the building, to the hinterland of that, and it was an incredible wasteland. It was old buildings, old warehouses. It was a forgotten space. So the front looked fabulous. The academic spirit was thriving, but in the back was this tired, old, almost industrial legacy. But there was one company called Genzyme, which had the courage to set up in a warehouse. Started by a man called Henry Tremere, which I had the good fortune to meet. And I remember interviewing him for work that I was doing at MIT. And I literally said, why aren't you in Silicon Valley, or why aren't you in New York, or why are you here? This is a warehouse, for goodness sake. And he said, proximity will be everything in the future of medicine. Collaboration will be everything in the future of medicine. And I want to be alongside both the academic institutions and the students that are coming out of those academic institutions to drive Genzyme forward. Now, Genzyme might not be a name that is common currency to you today, but for those of us in precision medicine, we'll recognize it as one of the very, very early pioneers of precision medicine. And what struck me really as I went back to Boston about a year and a half ago, and I walked back through the front of that facade and into the back, what struck me is that it wasn't a wasteland anymore, and that the Genzyme domino had fallen, And around it now were Sanofi and Pfizer and Glaxo and Google and Foundation Medicine. In fact, it had become a thriving environment, an ecosystem of organizations that were collaborating together. And some of the most profound observations of our time are coming out of those institutions in that location. So it brings me, I think, to the vision. And actually, this isn't my vision. It's a vision of David and the team at Octopus, who back in 2015 were driving past this site, which had for so many years been, for all of us growing up in Northern Ireland, a place, a venue to go and to see various events. But they saw something else here. What they saw was an opportunity to create a home, if you like, a mixed use facility for life sciences, for well-being, and indeed for patient flow. And of course, it has gone through many manifestations. David and the team will tell you that, you know, they've had blueprints and ideas and concepts. But what they've had that has driven them forward is a singular vision to say, let's start. Let's take that step forward to put something on site and expect that bravery that Joanne alluded to. Let's take that step and build it, and let's see what happens. And so it was as I was listening and speaking with David and the CBR team, very late on in their journey, they'd already fought the 3 Ps, the politicians, the planning, and the pollution management issues. They were already well into that. And I saw, you know, this feels to me a bit like that experience back at MIT. You have to find a home, you have to start, and out of that start you create a domino effect. So it was a natural place for myself and the team at Dataworks to say, let's come here. Let's be an anchor tenant. Let's be that first domino. Let's create a modern, thriving space, which, as again you've heard from David, what it aspires to be. And I have no doubt in my mind that they will deliver on that vision in pretty short order. And so, you know, welcome to the Dataworks, not just a space, not just an office building within a life science park that's coming out of the ground, but welcome to the Dataworks as a concept of collaboration, which we in Northern Ireland will both benefit from. We will hoover up the data, the insights, and most importantly, the professional assistance that the universities and others have provided to a business environment in Northern Ireland. And from my point of view, I hope that in years to come, people turn around and say that Dataworks was a bit like Genzyme. It was the first domino, and as that domino fell over, others followed in its footsteps. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I think it's so important to see and hear Peter's vision and just, you know, the real enthusiasm he has for it. I'm going to be using that line about the first domino now, quite a few pieces of copy in the future. Peter's going to join us back on stage shortly, but before that, we're going to jump into our first panel session, which looks at the commercialisation of research in Northern Ireland. And to do that, I'm going to be joined on stage by Brian McCall from Cubis, which is the commercialisation arm of Queen's University Belfast. And joining us virtually is Luke Hake, partner in the health investment team at Octopus Ventures. Brian, if I could ask you to join me on stage. Thank you. Firstly, thanks both for joining us today, Luke and Dave for zooming in with us. First of all, Brian, I want to drill down on Cubis, and it's a key part in the Northern Ireland economy here and business in Northern Ireland. Can you explain what it does?
Yep, it's nice to hear that, thank you. So we're the tech transfer arm of Queen's University. So if you like, we're a business that creates businesses, the sort of tech businesses that you might be looking to house here. We're in the process, we're quite busy now. We've ranked quite well, which might be one of the topics that we pick up with Luke later, but we're in the process of creating our 100th spin-out. The inventor is in the room today. So we've been quite active, quite busy. You can see the impact that might have on the Northern Irish economy. If you like, those are the dominoes. I think probably the work rate in terms of creating those dominoes has not been sufficient previously for them to create that ripple effect. I think we're getting to that now. We create about 6 businesses a year. Most of those are investable propositions. We're investors as well. I'll come back to that. We have a portfolio at the moment of about 45 companies. It goes up and down as we create more companies, as we exit companies. Our track record in terms of creating wealth for investors and exiting companies has been quite good. Again, maybe that will feature in the conversation about the Octopus report. We're also we're an investor, so we often invest in these businesses before private investors will come anywhere near them. We're actually the third most active seed investor in Northern Ireland after Techstart and Clarendon, who we work with very tightly. And I think another angle to what we do is we're very hands-on in the way we create these companies, and we have a process. We've developed a process. And in fact, I mean, I think this is a bit of an opportunity for Belfast and Northern Ireland. We are almost the centre of entrepreneurial programs for the UK university sector. So we run programs such as iCure, which is the main Innovate UK program for helping develop spin-outs across the whole of the UK. That really is about making sure that we identify the market potential of these companies. Maybe come on to say something about that later. But it does provide a real possibility for Northern Ireland to be the kind of pipeline of tech companies, not just coming out of Queen's and Ulster, but the rest of the UK sector.
Yeah, we've been involved in some of those programs, and it's great to see people from all over the UK and Ireland coming here to Belfast, because I mean the programs really are really important.
Yeah.
Look, I want to bring you in. Can you give us a rundown of Octopus Ventures, what it does, and indeed your involvement in the life sciences sector?
Sure. Look, really great to be here. So thank you everyone for listening in. So Octopus is really looking to invest in the ideas, technology, and businesses that are set to change the world. I guess we are an early stage technology investor, investing predominantly around 5 verticals. One of the key ones for us is health, which itself is subdivided into life sciences and bio, as we describe it, as well as digital health. But we also invest in fintech, consumer enterprise, and deep tech, which is a kind of catch-all and itself kind of leaks into the healthcare space, if you like. As a fund, we invest about 150 million to 200 million per annum into early stage businesses. And when I say that, I mean, these are early stage companies. So, smallest check sizes we write are around 1 million. Typical check sizes between 1 and 10 million. And these investments are into companies that may be in the very early stages of formation. So startups, spin-outs, we're one of the few larger institutions to actually actively invest in spin-out companies from universities. And we'll invest around 40 million, I guess, in the healthcare space in the next 12 months or so. But we also have the capacity to write larger checks, and I think this is important, and we can talk about this maybe a bit later, for the healthcare space. Clearly, spin-outs can be quite capital intensive, developing new technologies from IP, and so having the ability to write up to 25 million checks in follow-on rounds, really gives us that capacity to invest from the very earliest stage, and then to follow the business through its development life cycle, which is a real benefit to the academic founders, entrepreneurs, executives, because it enables us to continue on that journey with them without them necessarily needing to go out and raise external capital, albeit that's usually the case. From a life sciences perspective, and I was originally a biochemist, biotechnologist, and geneticist. So I spend quite a lot of my time thinking about the kind of frontier technologies in life sciences. So synthetic biology, biotechnology. I spend a lot of time thinking about data, as has been discussed, and how we make better use of data and federating that data and really taking it out of the silos in which it sits. Recently, I've spent a lot of time looking at platform technologies. So we tend to not invest in single asset therapeutics. We tend to be more of a platform technology investor. That's not to say we won't do that. It's just not necessarily our specialism. So I've spent recent weeks, as you'd imagine, or months looking at novel drug delivery systems for biologics and for difficult druggable targets, if you like. Unsurprisingly, new vaccine delivery modalities. How can I stabilize vaccines and deliver them more effectively without necessity for cold chain? antivirals to go alongside that. We've spent quite a lot of time looking at cell and gene therapy and manufacturing technologies, really trying to bring those kind of life-saving therapies like CAR T, which are, reserved for the very few, more into the mainstream, and how can you do that to reduce the cost? And then finally, just commenting on, I guess, the diagnosis piece, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can work with companies with large data sets to try and drive augmented diagnosis in the cancer space via machine learning, for example. So we've made a number of investments in that space over the years.
Brian, Luke's talked about his involvement in the life sciences sector. What about Cubis? How important is it to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's important. I think probably if you looked at the trends in the investment markets, generally you get about, a third life sciences, 2/3 digital, something. It's inverted for us, and that's largely dictated by the fact that we are allied with a research-based Queen's University, which has certain strengths. So pharmacy, oncology, digital health, respiratory, vision sciences, those sorts of things. And so you can see the pattern play out in terms of our spin-outs. I think we announced 4 seed deals over the last month or so, and I think 3 of those were in the life sciences, so specifically Vasc-Versa and Genome. So it's incredibly important for us. And developing the sort of investor relationships, as Luke says, to be able to fund those early stage is important, but to get to the next level, Northern Ireland has not always had a great access to capital markets, but as of yesterday, I mean, the sort of figures that Luke was talking about, in the tens of millions, we've executed a deal in that sort of bracket for the first time. It's not announced yet, so I'm not going to say very much about that. So for us, it's a really hot area of activity. And I'm hoping, with the alliances that we're going to build with Harani, and if we can find the right ecosystem places to place these companies, there's a real prospect of creating clusters. You can see it playing out already in that sort of health and digital. One of the companies I'm particularly close to is Sunrai, and there are many others in our portfolio that are precisely in that sweet spot between health and digital. And I think that will be a pattern that will play out for us and more generally in the economy.
Look, from your point of view, I mean, I know you're investors as well, but look, from your point of view, how important is having university involvement at that early stage of development and commercialization of development in your investment decision?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as being important in the investment decision. I guess it's fundamental to actually, building an asset that is investable. So, unlike some of my colleagues who focus on startups, rather than spin-outs, virtually all of the opportunities that we're looking at are started in universities because of the heavy IP nature of what they're doing. So, we spend a lot of time working with research groups that have track records of successful commercialization. So, we spend a lot of time scanning the landscape, looking for universities that have got, a history of being able to take academic research and turn it into something that, is investable. And that's not all universities can do that, and certainly not all universities do that well. So, we spend time with TTOs, helping them to identify existing interesting opportunities. And we obviously need to have really good, strong relationships with those TTOs in order to ensure that when these spin-outs are formed, there's minimal friction with respect to IP transfer. Is the business set up in a way that is investable? Is there ongoing relationships with the university with respect to IP pipeline, for example? For talent, you mentioned earlier, having that kind of ecosystem for collaboration is really important in the early stages of these businesses, as it can provide additional funding, it can provide non-dilutive funding, it can also provide resource, equipment, and other things that would typically be unavailable to organizations or companies that didn't have that close proximity. So it's super important to us.
It obviously is, and I want to just move on to touch on the Octopus Ventures Entrepreneurial Impact Report. Cubis came top for 2 years in a row now. Yeah.
It's only been run twice.
Yeah, you barely mentioned it, Brian. Can I ask, first of all, just Luke, what is the entrepreneurial impact report, and what gives Cubis, what makes Cubis take the top spot now for the second year?
Yeah, sure. And look, congratulations to the guys. We obviously haven't run it in the last year. We've given it a bit of break because of COVID, but we're certainly looking to rerun the ranking in coming years. So, now, the Entrepreneurial Impact Ranking really, it focuses on UK universities' capacities to produce, quality, investor-ready spin-out companies. So, the way we calculate the ranking is to take self-reported data from universities. So, it's actually data the universities themselves produce around the total funding, the number of spin-outs created, disclosures, patents, sales from spin-outs. And we really combine all that data to create a kind of single score based on how we as investors would look at startup or spin-out companies. And, Cubis have come top of that ranking for the last 2 years, as you say, and that really reflects the success of the team at just creating great spin-outs and critically having demonstrated success of those companies through exits. And many of those exits, I guess, have been in the life sciences space. So PathXL, digital pathology business, acquired by Philips, or Fusion Antibodies, which was listed on the LSE. So, I think the team have built just a really successful culture and process of high quality startup creation. When we kind of did the deep dive in the 2020 report as to, one of the things that, what were the things that really drove that success, I think, what was interesting and really stood out for us was this kind of notion of really identifying customers and, the customer discovery process being a key component of what makes these companies successful. Because I think oftentimes when you have spin-out companies, they may have a really interesting technology, maybe even a potentially interesting market, but for whatever reason, whatever they're doing, or indeed maybe the market isn't there for them to actually sell anything. And I think what Cubis has done a fantastic job of is really understanding the need for the product or service and being able to capitalize on that knowledge to create really successful companies. And not only does that help sales, but it also just helps with talent and recruitment, which is such a key factor because folks don't want to join spin-outs if they don't believe there's a market for what they're doing.
And obviously a nice commendation for the work that you're doing, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, guys, thanks so much for your time today. It's been really interesting. We could talk for a lot longer. That brings us to the end of this first panel session and on to our final panel session, one which has a stellar cast. And if you excuse, we're just going to have a few seat rearrangements. We have with us for the final panel session, Ashlyn Rice, who's Managing Director at Analytics Engines. We have Professor Mark Lawler, who's Professor of Digital Health at Queen's University, Belfast, and Scientific Director at Datacam, the UK's Health Data Research Hub for Cancer. Also joining us again is Peter Keeling from Diaceutics, and this session is going to be chaired by Joanne.
We've got a stellar cast here. I'm going to ask each of the panellists just to go around and introduce themselves very briefly. Mark, would you?
Yeah. Hi, everybody, and those who are viewing as well. Mark Lawler, I'm Associate Pro Vice Chancellor and Professor of Digital Health at Queen's University, Belfast. And I'm also Scientific Director of Datacam, which is the UK's Health Data Research Hub for Cancer.
Thank you. And then Ashlyn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashlyn Rice. I'm Managing Director with Analytics Engines, formerly a graduate of Queen's University, Belfast, with a PhD in chemistry. And thank you very much for inviting me here today.
Brilliant. Peter, we've already had your intro, so thank you for that. So fantastic. So if I can come to you first, Mark, can you just give a flavour of the work that you do at Queen's?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So 5 years ago, actually this month, with colleagues, I published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine. And in that paper, I talked about this idea of a cancer knowledge network. Thankfully, 5 years later, we've actually achieved that. And we've achieved that here in Belfast. And it's really looking at how do we turn data and also information into intelligence. And that's really that's what gets me up every day. And how do we do that for the benefit of patients? But that's why I'm in this job. The job that I do is to look at how can we use data to really inform earlier diagnosis, as Peter said, better treatments, but also things like better rehabilitation and return to normal life, because that's what patients want. And you need to be able to collect data on that as well as on the other areas in genomics, etc., which is obviously an area that I also work in. And what we found was that that's really important in terms of not only understanding what's happening, so what's happening in the patient or in the population, but also using it to actually develop those new diagnostic tests, the ones that will actually allow us to detect cancer earlier, therefore treat patients much more easily and much more effectively, and also then use it to diagnose or to design new treatments. And one of the things Peter said earlier on is it's very critical that we all need to work together on this. This is a team game. It's not an individual game. Ivory towers are out the window. This is a team game. And what we found is working together, and that's working together with patients. We have a very strong patient and public engagement and involvement group who are part of DataCan, working with our medical doctors, working with our scientists, and also working with the industry. And bringing that sort of glue together of all those different talents and expertise is how we achieve a real difference for patients, and we get fair value for patients, for the National Health Service, for academics, but also for industry. And it's looking at how we do that most effectively. It's what I think allows us to do this in Northern Ireland. We may be small, but we punch above our weight. And one of the ways in which we do that is because we can actually look at things on a population level. 1.8 million people in Northern Ireland. We can actually do that type of work and look at the whole population and also contribute to and lead 66 million person analysis right across the United Kingdom.
Fantastic. And just to tease it into that a little bit more, how important is it, and what's the value that companies like Analytics Engines and Diaceutics brings to that?
Yeah, incredibly important. As Peter already mentioned, we've been working together in work in relation to COVID, and I'll come back to that later. But that's a very much a partnership, looking at how do we use that data, particularly on diagnosis, in relation to what's the impact of something like COVID on that diagnostic journey, but also looking at things like health economics. So we need to be practical. We need not only to think about how we use data in the context of genomics or health, but also how do we actually justify the costs of things. And we've had a very strong knowledge transfer partnership with Diaceutics, where we actually bring our health economics expertise to bear to address critical issues, critical challenges. Similarly with analytic engines, you're looking at ways in which we can use that data. A number of researchers in Queen's are working very closely with analytics engines in that regard. So we see this as critical. It's not an add-on. It's not something, I'd like to do that. That's how we're going to deliver the best for our patients, new diagnosis, new treatments, new rehabilitation, return to normal living.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, and I can see that it's key. So, Aisling, if I can ask you, as a business, how important is it for you to have close ties with academic institutions and also hubs such as this?
Sure. So Analytics Engines is a company, we are obsessive about data, and our objective is to provide our customers with value from their data. And if I can just maybe strip back to some very simplistic terms, we have very broad capability in our organisation, from data engineering, data science, right through to AI and machine learning techniques. But when you look at the set of challenges our customers are having, you can really distill them down into 3 areas. And I think they are around scale, just the sheer volume of data that exists out there. And how do you start to extract value from that data? The fact that still data remains very siloed. And when you're looking at data in that silo, it doesn't become effective as a contributor to decision making and intelligent reasoning. So how do we get better connections between that siloed data sets? And also, how do you contextualize that data? How do you take relationships and patterns and observe those across the data sets? And of course then it is who can access that data. We have a shortage of data scientists and analysts, and one of the key aspects of our business now is in the whole area of democratizing data. And that basically means making it accessible to our customers. Mm-hmm. Analytics Engines is a spin-out, very proud spin-out from Queen's University, and I had the pleasure of sitting on the Cubis board for 8 years, so I'm very aware of the extreme importance of having that collaboration. You know, our market, as I think you'll hear from most of the speakers today, is evolving very, very fast. The technology is moving at an incredible pace. And to be able to tap into that expertise that the universities and the centres of expertise that the universities breed is really key to our business. Not just tapping into that knowledge, but also tapping into the talent. So we are very dependent on having access to that pool of talent that comes through the universities here in Northern Ireland. So collaboration is key with our peers also, and I think, the concepts you've heard Peter talk about this morning in terms of the provision of an ecosystem. We were debating recently about, what has been the most problematic issue in the last year in working from home. And to Peter's point, it's not the nice building. It's the ability to share knowledge, to have those informed discussions, to have that opportunity to exchange and create new ideas. So absolutely key for our business is that continued collaboration with the universities and our peers going forward.
Fantastic to hear, and I think it's going to be enabled by these sorts of facilities and the network that's being built across the region. So Aisling, just to sort of continue with that, if we think about the next phase of data analytics, what we're looking to in the future, what do you think is the major way in which individuals and companies are going to benefit from that?
Mm-hmm. Look, I think there are phenomenal steps forward in the whole area of AI and machine learning and the commoditization of those aspects as well. But when I come back to my point in your earlier question about the accessibility to data, the availability of connecting data from disparate data sets, and then being able to present that to users who are not necessarily coming forward with a software or programming background. And at Analytics Engines, we are delighted to be launching our search and discovery platform, which does exactly that. The platform is called Minerva, and it addresses those key challenges. It enables users to interrogate their data, to connect their data, and to do all of that in a low-code or no-code fashion, which again hits to the point of democratizing our data. The framework is built in such a way that we can keep abreast of the developments in the AI space, and our users can avail of those going forward.
That sounds fantastic. And just to go back to you, Mark, has COVID reshaped the importance of this data sharing in healthcare?
Let me tell you a story. It starts off with a personal story. 29th of March 2020, my uncle died of a COVID-related illness. And one of my colleagues, who's an oncologist in Croatia, Edward Vidoliak, while reaching out to me to sympathize with me on my loss, also shared with me this chilling fact. He said, people are fearing a COVID-19 diagnosis worse than a cancer diagnosis. So I thought about that and I said, yeah, that's actually true. Anecdotally, we've heard similar things in the UK. This is back in March, so right at the start of the pandemic. So we decided, okay, is this true or not? And how are we going to know that? The only way we're going to know that is actually to study it, to actually collect data from across the United Kingdom. So that's what we did. We collected data from hospital trusts across the United Kingdom. We looked to see what was the impact on the diagnostic pathway, what was the impact on the treatment pathway. It was very severe. We found that 7 out of 10 people who had a suspicion of cancer, who would normally be referred on to specialist cancer services to see if they had cancer or not, that wasn't happening. 4 to 10 people, their chemotherapy was being delayed. This was absolutely disastrous. So we immediately shared that data with the 4 chief medical officers around the United Kingdom, with the National Cancer Director. And that actually caused people then to say, oh, there's a problem here. We need to address that problem. We then presented that data to the European Cancer Organization, which is Europe's largest multi-professional cancer organization. They straight away set up a focus network, which I'm privileged to co-lead. That's led to us developing by bringing together people from right across Europe, bringing together expertise. We set up a 7-point plan that we launched. We now have a Time to Act campaign, which we launched with the European Commissioner for Health and Food Safety, and in looking at ways in which we can actually get that message across to the community and also use that information to drive better care for patients. So there's just an example of how a simple statement led to a piece of work, and we've continued that work then with Peter. He mentioned it, the abstract that you see there in your folders at ASCO, represents really important work that's practical. So I like the name of this, Dataworks. Yes, data does work, and that's what we did. We used data to actually understand what was happening and highlight the problem. And the problem is a very significant problem. And Peter is right. Unless we do something about it, this problem will become the next epidemic, a cancer epidemic. But we only were able to find that out by using data and by working together. If we hadn't have done that and got the cooperation of the hospital trusts, everything we do, as I say, goes past our patient committee. If our patient committee say don't do it, we don't do it. And it's that trust and that really important way in which we work together, truly together, is the way in which we're going to use data. So I always use the phrase, data can save lives. Yes, it can. Data works. Yes, data can work. And that's the way in which we're really going to use data to drive both better care for our patients, but also better innovation. And using that innovation to really think differently, to bring the best minds together, the different people in this room, the different people who are on this call, working together, using data for the betterment of mankind.
Fantastic. And I think there's another phrase I know that Peter uses a lot as well, is data for good. I was just going to bring you in, Ashlyn, there. Can you discuss data for good and how data analytics can provide wider societal benefits?
Yes, well, I think we're all convinced that data really works. It is, the recognition now for businesses and public and private agencies to take informed decisions based on a data strategy is absolutely critical. And I think, we've had the great fortune to work across many different sectors. For example, working with the Education Authority, ensuring safer transport for our children to and from schools, making sure more operational efficiency in terms of the fleet of vehicles used. We have had the opportunity to work with Asthma UK in terms of being able to map together hospitalisations and look at factors that present those numbers, and they would include things like socio-economic factors, environmental factors. So I think, in terms of the benefits that the data can bring, they are vast. I think, as we have been informed this morning, it is getting to a place where customers and our users, our health advisors, our policy setters have access to that data and the right tools to make informed decisions based on that output.
Thank you. I think that's absolutely critical. So thank you for sharing that. So Peter, if we can come to you last here on this panel. Apologies, we've heard some great speakers here. We've heard about your vision, and you're the first domino here as Diaceutics. What's it been like to build a business in Belfast and the collegiate feeling that you've experienced here? And what would you say to others following in your footsteps?
Well, look, building a business is not for the faint of heart. In anybody's setting, you're looking around you for people who are leaning towards you, whether it be funders in the shape of Octopus and others, whether it be kind of supporters and friends, and you're building a momentum around you. There's always a tipping point in any business where you go, you're as an entrepreneur, you go, is there a business? And then you go, goodness, there's a business. How do I make it a big business? Those are kind of the essence. And in order to make it a big business, you absolutely need to rely stand on the shoulders of others. And that's what we've done in Northern Ireland. Start a journey 15 years ago, and then use the ecosystem around us to really support that, both Invest Northern Ireland, Queen's University. Many of our amazing people inside the company are walking out of the halls of the University of Ulster and Queen's University and walking into us and showing us that they can stand shoulder to shoulder on the global stage. And in terms of the vision, this is a road well travelled for Northern Ireland. Those of us who have lived here have driven past old industrial works like the Sirocco Works and the Rope Works and even the Water Works. And those as groups or organisations, these were almost jewels on the global stage. They were jewels on the crown of the global stage. And they represented Belfast and Northern Ireland advancing at its best. And so here we are again. We might not be the greatest investors in rocket technology. We might not be the greatest investors in the electrification of the car. But we are right at the forefront of using healthcare data and other data sets to really understand that. We have not missed this wave. We're right at the front of it. And you've heard the passion literally on the stage in front of you for the people who are driving this forward. And so we can take the inspiration of those old industrial legacies, those works as they were, those proud statements of global intent, and bring it back here to, as we've inspired to call this the Dataworks, because we believe that we can lean in and lead on a global stage.
Fantastic. I think that's such a brilliant vision, and I'm really excited about the convergence of all of those technologies and the enthusiasm and passion of the people driving it forward. So it just remains to thank the panellists here. So thank you, Mark, Ashlyn, and Peter, and hand over to David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. That brings our proceedings here to a close. Hopefully you've got an idea of the vision behind not just Dataworks, and that's really important, and Peter brings it across really well, but also the vision for the life sciences and indeed the data sector here in Northern Ireland. I hope you enjoyed this morning's session. For further details on Dataworks, do speak to Robert Diddy from CBRE and Ian Duddy from Colliers, who are in the audience and will be around after the event. There's also a possibility of a hard hat tour. If anybody would like to do it, we can show you around. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for watching as well. It's been great to have you here. It's been great to be able to transmit around the world. We hope you'll agree that it won't be long before this space becomes a global hub for the industrial application of science in Northern Ireland and the world. Thank you very much indeed.